Now that our validation functions are ready, let's go back to our includes contact file. And after this statement here, where we're actually associating the output of this validate function with the errors, let's on the same line just space and use print r and pass through this errors variable, which should contain all the error messages if we submit the form with incorrect data. So if we save it and preview it in a browser, I'm going to just reload the page rather than refresh it. So just put the cursor inside of the URL field and just hit return. And now what I'm going to do is just click on the send message button without actually filling in any information. So if we submit the form, you can see this array now is printed in the browser, obviously above the template, which isn't quite what we want to have, but let's quickly have a look at what we actually have here inside of this errors array. It tells us obviously department isn't right, name, email, telephone, and comment, which is right because obviously we haven't submitted any data with it. Now let's try and inside of the email field, put the incorrect email address. So say me@me, and let's hit return. And now this email, rather than saying that there is no value, it tells us that it's an invalid email address. You can see the form, I was able to submit the form, but on the server it's been validated and tells us that this isn't the valid email address, which is great because that's exactly what we need. So now obviously this displaying all this above the form, above the template, the entire template isn't quite the way we want it. So let's go back to our editor, and if we now remove this print r call here, and what we're going to do is go back to the functions.php file. And if I create a few new lines so we can see the code a little bit better. And on the new line, we are going to create a new function called getValidationMessage. So we start with the function getValidationMessage, and we pass through two arguments. The first one will be the key, and the second one will be errors. So errors, there we go, and it will be an empty array by default. And then set of curly brackets. You can put them both on new lines as we did before. It doesn't really matter. Again, as you may remember, PHP doesn't care about this sort of things, but because these are pretty short, I'm gonna put them in line. So next thing I'm going to do is check if an exclamation mark, again, array key exists, and we're checking for key inside of the errors. And if it does not exist, then we're going to return null, which means obviously there isn't a validation message for this given key inside of the errors collection, this array, in which case we don't return any value, we just return null. Otherwise, we're simply going to return errors, and we are going to fetch the message by this given key, which is going to be the field name basically. So that's our get validation message. Let's now go to our pages contact file, which I've got opened here. And what I'm going to start with is the department field. So if I just quickly, after the label, what I'm going to do is after this star symbol here, I'm going to start with the opening PHP tag and then echo get validation message, and I'm passing through the name of the field, which is going to be department. You can just select it and paste it through as the first argument. Obviously it's a string, make sure that you either use single double quotes around it, and then our errors array, so errors, which we have inside of this includes contact.php file. First, when the page loads, that's why we've created an empty array when the page first loads, because we could just create it here when the form has been submitted. But in that case, because we are using this within the form when the page first loads as well, we need to have it available. That's why we need to obviously declare it first when the page loads as well. Okay, so we've got this first one, obviously then semicolon after the brackets and closing PHP tag. If I now save it and preview everything, refresh, obviously reload the page rather than refresh, and if I now submit the form, you'll see that the validation message is now displayed above this select field here. If I select any of the options and hit return inside of any of the fields, you can see this message is gone, but obviously we don't seem to be keeping the selection in a field. So if I return it again, submit the form again, the message is back. We will look at the sticky form fields in just a moment as well. But as you can see, it works just the way we want it. So let's quickly apply the same thing to all other fields. So if we go, I'm going to copy this entire line here with this get validation message. And all I'm going to do is just basically change the name of the key that I'm passing through. So if I just save this, copy the entire thing, For email, the same thing. Obviously, this time we are interested in an email field, so the right message for the email field. Then for the telephone number, let's paste and override the first argument. And then the last one is for the comment. So comment as the first one, save it. And if we preview everything in the browser just to make sure it works. So if I now hit return, there we go. All fields have the validation applied. If I try any dummy email address here, obviously, let's say me, and hit return. Here we go. It tells me that it's an invalid email address. If I put any blurb here, obviously that validates fine because there was there was some content there. Let's now quickly have a look at the way how we can actually keep the values that we've entered within the form once it's been submitted. So let's quickly go back to the editor. And if we now open our functions.php file, after the get validation message, we're going to create another function called sticky input. And we pass two arguments through. So the first one was going to be the key, the name of the field, and the second will be of the array type, and it's going to be basically the collection of items from the form, this post array. So items, and by default is going to be no. And then set of two curly brackets. The first thing we're going to do is check if !array key exists, and we're checking for the given key on this items array. So if it's not within the post array, then we simply return no. We don't need to return anything else because this item simply doesn't exist in a post yet. Otherwise, we're going to return the value that's inside of this items array by this field name, so the key. So that's sticky input. Now for the select element, form element, we need to create another one, function sticky select, and again key as the first one, and then array is going to be of items as the second one, empty by default, but also we need to put in the value because we're going to be also matching against the given value on the given option of the select element. So again, we are going to check if doesn't exist in the array, basically the key array key doesn't exist, and we take the key and then we take items, obviously, then we also return null. Otherwise, what we are going to be doing is check if items, and we check for the given key because now we know it does exist. Otherwise, this first condition would eliminate this following line. So if this item value equals the value that we're actually trying to match, then what we want to do is return, and in between a single quote, space select equals selected equals selected. This is basically the attribute which makes the given item on the select element basically selected. And then otherwise we return no. We always should return something if the function is supposed to return something. If it's a void function, then don't worry. But if it returns value at some point of any condition of the condition returns something, then make sure that you return something at the end. So if none of this basically evaluates to true, just return null at the end. Okay, now let's apply this to our forms. So we go into the pages contact, so pages contact.php, which I've got already open, and the name of the first function was sticky input. So let's apply the sticky input starting from the bottom now, because I'm at the bottom of the file. In between, because it's a text area, it doesn't have value attribute, obviously inputs do. So for the text area, in between the opening text area and the closing text area tag, we are going to put our PHP tag, echo, and then sticky input. And obviously the first argument and the only argument, the first argument that I'm going to be passing through is the name of the field, which is comment, and the second one will be post array, which we obviously will only collect if I go back to our include contact, and if we scroll up, you can see we are collecting here, obviously this get post will return empty array if the form hasn't been submitted, so we're passing this through basically as a second argument. So if I now save the file, copy all this, and move on to the telephone obviously is an input type, so it's got a value attribute, so I can now paste it for this attribute here. And then obviously first argument we need to change to telephone. Let's copy the entire thing, go for email, copy the email and paste as the first argument, and let's copy the entire thing again. Then we have name. This one will be name. And then last one, the first one actually on the form is the sticky select. We need the select. So I'm just going to copy what I've just copied, but rather than sticky input, going to be sticky select. And then we have the name of the field is department. Actually, it's not here. It's not on the select tag. It's on the option tag. So let's use it here. There we go. So we've got option value, and after this, we need this sticky select, and we need the key that we want to compare against. So because we need to make sure that obviously the submitted field is coming with the given key. If it matches the key, then select this given option through which we are currently looping. I hope that makes sense. Let's just save it and preview it in the browser. Refresh the page, and now I'm going to reload everything. So as you can see from the previous submission, this field now has what I've typed in. Let's now select sales and hit return in any of the fields, and sales still selected. If I put something inside of the email field, say me, and hit return, that also stays here. So now that our form validates the submitted input, displays validation messages, and has sticky form fields applied, let's move to the next video when we actually are sending the submitted information to the designated email address.